Alrighty everyone, welcome back. We are now getting closer to the end of November of 2022, and with of course both Bob Iger and Bob Chapek now officially transitioning, with Bob Iger in and Chapek out, a lot of Star Wars fans out there have been a little skeptical, a little bit worried and frightened about where Star Wars is going, and as we just discussed this about a couple of days ago, there's really nothing to be frightened about when it comes to Iger taking over Star Wars, as he openly said that a lot of Chapek's strategies and ideas will remain as is, and will be built and grandfathered in to, of course, the Star Wars roadmap and the overall structure of Disney and how they handle Star Wars. However, we're not quite sure if that's going to apply to Marvel and other franchises out there like Avatar, etc. Now, on top of all of this, what's even all the more exciting is the fact that we have, of course, Chapek and Iger going through a lot of different things at this moment. We already know that Chapek is somebody who really wanted to focus on the TV shows more so than the movies for a very long time, but he was greenlighting a couple of movies here and there. What Bob Iger is set out to do is, of course, doing a couple of different things with the roadmap, not necessarily on a creative scale, but more so on a format level. And what I mean by that is how the roadmap is going to be formatted. We're going to dive into all of this right now. So, with that being said and all, what's even all the more exciting is that everything related to Chapek and Iger has been a very interesting subject recently, because this is the second transition that they have had that have been both described as being very awkward and rough and very difficult. Now, they do have problems with each other, and there are a multitude of issues that they have. Chapek was able to speak about a couple of those issues finally and putting something to rest and allowing the fans, whether you're a Marvel fan or a Star Wars fan, to actually know more about all of that. Now, with many new Star Wars TV shows currently in the works by Disney and Lucasfilm, creators John and Dave are getting ready to make some pretty big announcements for the fans. Now, it's noted that with the Disney CEO Bob Iger now back in and Bob Chapek officially fired, Chapek recently came out and wanted to set things straight about his conflicts with Bob Iger and the reported awkward and rough transition both in 2020 and this year. Now, Bob Chapek went on to state the following: "As some of you know, you may have heard around, myself and Mr. Iger didn't actively agree on everything on the direction of this company. But I wanted to set things straight with why our transitions both back a couple of years ago and a couple of days ago were very difficult for us. We both had different visions of Disney franchises, ones like Marvel and Star Wars, and where I wanted to bring it, and where Bob wanted to also bring it. My focus was to extend and focus more on shows for a very long time, rather than the movies right away, for both brands, and Mr. Iger wanted to shift away from the shows and only use that as a temporary experiment." Now, let me just pause here for a quick moment. The thing about Chapek is that he also wanted to embrace the movies, and he was setting up movies. We already talked about this. He was setting up the new Star Wars trilogy, the other Star Wars trilogy as well, and even a handful of one-off films. One of which was the Patty Jenkins movie that fell apart, Taika Waititi's movies falling apart. They're now fully focused on the post-Episode 9 solo film, and other trilogies are now in the works, thankfully, of course, because of Bob Chapek. However, the difference between Chapek and Iger is that Iger wanted to use the shows more or less as an experiment rather than a solution, whereas Chapek wanted to use the shows as a permanent long-form type of scenario where you're going to have a stretch of TV shows forever and ever. That's what they actually want to do. And some of that's being altered a little bit right now by Bob Iger. He's mixing things together. And there was some kind of agreement that both Iger and Chapek were able to agree on. We're going to be going over that right now. So, moving on to the next thing here, alright. He goes on to say, "This is something that we had extensive issues about each other during our transitions we had, and we also had disagreed over our direction and usage of Disney parks. With franchises out there like Star Wars and Marvel, myself and Iger agreed on a middle ground to combine both of our direction to stay loyal to both sides of the audience that will enjoy both formats, which is why he will have a series of announcements coming soon by next year for everybody to be informed on. Now, before I get to the last big bit here about what Bob Chapek says, to put things more simple, is that Chapek wanted to just focus mainly on shows and just a couple of movies spread out over time. What Iger wants to do is that he wants to also focus on shows, but he also wants to make a ton of Star Wars movies. He wants to make it like Marvel. He wants to bring Star Wars to a Marvel Cinematic Universe level of output of media. TV shows and movies releasing simultaneously, and multiple of them a year. That's what Iger wants, but that's what Chapek wanted to avoid because he figured that that has to be a slow build-up to do that without, meeting fatigue too fast. And you know what? I think that Chapek might be a little correct on some things there. With Iger, you don't want to just jump right in and release a bunch of movies and shows every single year like that. So Chapek wanted to slowly build things up, right? First it was 1 show a year, then 2 shows a year, then 3 shows a year, then eventually crossing that bridge to where it would be 2 movies a year, along with 3 to 4 shows a year as well. What Iger wants to do is he just wants to jump right in very fast and expand that roadmap and just put this stuff out immediately, as fast as possible. So there are a couple of differences in their roadmap because of what their visions were like, but they were able to agree on a middle ground here that allows them to combine both of their formats of the roadmap. I know it's a little confusing here, but it really boils down to, do you want to rush into things or do you want to slowly build things up over time? And basically the agreement was to do both, to kind of slow things, and slowly build things up over time, but release a bigger output and focus on a bigger and bigger output over time as well. So that's what they're overall aiming for, and that's why they had a big disagreement with each other, was the format of both the Star Wars franchise and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As far as Marvel, they didn't really talk about that too much, but I think I have a pretty good idea, is that they want to make things more quality driven and geared up toward the fans. They had a little bit of a sideways scenario for the past year and a half with the Marvel shows, at least I believe. There were a couple of duds in there, but that's just my opinion. Looking at Bob Chapek here, though, and Bob Iger transitioning, I think that Iger has a solid shot at really turning things around. If he plays his cards right and doesn't play games, he's got this. Do I like Bob Iger? I don't. I never really liked the guy. On a business level, on a creative level for Star Wars, but you know what? It is going to be very interesting over the fact that he's keeping Chapek's direction of giving John and Dave the keys. That's remaining intact, so don't worry, that's not being sabotaged. And he's also combining some of the roadmap format into his format of the roadmap. So you're not going to see tons of stuff releasing ASAP. So anyways, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know what you guys have to say about all of this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.